Hi, and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm your host, Jerry Roberts. Tonight, we continue our special series of interviews focused on the November 7th election, and we'll be talking about City Council District 6. Unfortunately, just before we came in the studio, Jack Usaferi, one of the candidates, had a personal situation and is unable to make it. Aaron Solis, another candidate, told us several months ago that he wouldn't be able to make it tonight, so we are going to be talking with Councilmember Gregg Hart. Gregg is an incumbent member of council who chairs the Finance Committee and was elected citywide in 2013 after serving previously from 1996 to 2003. His day job is Deputy Executive Director of the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments. And thank you very much for coming.
It's really a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You know, my experience in politics is that usually the challengers are the one that want to show up for debates and the incumbents don't, but I guess it's an only in Santa Barbara thing.
We have our unique political twists in Santa Barbara.
All right, first of all, I have a complaint as a citizen. I think the city's done a very poor job of educating people about district elections and what district they're in and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Where is District 6 and why don't more people know where they are, where they're living?
Well, it's the first cycle with district elections for the entire city, so I think people are going to get a little bit getting used to it. District 6 is primarily downtown. It actually starts up in the Cottage Hospital area. Alamar's the top street, and it's bounded by the freeway on the left side and State Street on the right side. It comes all the way downtown toward Canna Perdido Street, and then cuts across toward Santa Barbara High School, and then goes up to Sola Street. So it looks like a big L through downtown, and it covers some really important community institutions, Cottage Hospital, downtown Santa Barbara, both sides of State Street for a period of time, and then works its way over to Santa Barbara High School. So there's some real important community cultural institutions in the 6th District.
How many people live in District 6?
There's about 15,000 residents, about 7,700 voters. There are more renters than other districts that are up this cycle. This is a large renter district, and it's a little bit younger than the rest of the city. But it's also very diverse. All the districts really have a lot of diversity because Santa Barbara has a lot of diversity.
And how many of the 7,700 voters have you spoken to personally?
I've spoken to a lot of those folks. I haven't actually kept track on a daily basis, but I've been knocking on doors for months and working hard on my campaign, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback from people. I'm pretty well known, having been on the council for a long time, and people like to know in detail about the issues, and I'm willing to talk about that.
What's the number one thing that you hear people are concerned about?
Housing is the number one issue I hear about.
And housing in what sense? We need more, we need less, it's going to affect my neighborhood?
It really depends on if you're a renter or a homeowner. If you're a renter, it's the affordability and availability of rental housing, and owners are more worried about the implications of growth. Now,
all of the mayoral candidates, almost unanimously, I mean, this has been beating the drum since day one about putting more housing on State Street. That's what we need to do with State Street. Where do you come down on that, and how are you going to deal with the impacts of it in terms of parking and congestion and problems that already exist in the neighborhoods adjoining State Street in District 6?
Well, housing is the toughest issue I think that the city faces, and it is not new. It's something that's been a troubling, difficult issue for many, many years, decades really, because this is a very attractive place. People want to come here from all over the world. They're competing for limited housing. We're trying to preserve the quality of the community, so there's a tension. I personally think that we have gone too far on the side of not providing affordable rental housing, or any rental housing, as a matter of fact.
So you're a big AUD guy.
Yeah, I think it's an important tool. You know, we need to do something. The market isn't providing rental housing without the kind of additional incentives that come from the AUD program. And I don't agree with those who think it's too much, that there's too much that's coming from that. I think there's no evidence to support that. The truth of the matter is we have one project that's been occupied. It's the Mark.
It's nowhere near market rate rentals.
Well, that's the thing, and it's not full. There's only about a third of the units that have actually been rented. So I think the premise that is a market rent at a very high price is a really open question. And I think the developers of that project are probably wondering hard about that question too. So the idea that because we've created these rental housing incentives and we're going to have this huge flood of applications and developments as a result of these incentives, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that the program has demonstrated that there were people willing to make applications, and there was one developer who was willing to build a project, and that project was really expensive, and they thought that they were going to be able to get those rents and they were going to be fully rented. That hasn't proven to be the case. So I don't even know if we've hit the mark on the right kind of incentives to provide that housing.
Why now? Why put a cap on it?
I was very strongly opposed to that cap because I think it's premature. I think we need to have more evidence from more projects constructed and occupied before we tinker with the incentive program, because it isn't true that it's an overwhelming success. It is a very fledgling program and it's in infancy, and we can strangle it by being too aggressive with changing it.
Should we put housing in Macy's?
I think we could do all kinds of things on State Street. I don't know, frankly, if they're going to pencil. Again, if we're talking about the price of land on Upper State Street and the economics of that project perhaps not working, I don't know how you're going to pencil an affordable housing project or a workforce housing project on the most expensive land in downtown Santa Barbara. And the Macy's project is probably one of the most expensive parcels that you could imagine developing in Santa Barbara.
So how would you describe the situation on State Street now? Are we in despair, or should we be bubbly and optimistic about it? I mean, when you walk down State Street, you see those storefronts, you see aggressive panhandlers. What's your sense of what's going on there, and what should we do?
Well, I think the realistic truth is that it's not great, but it's not nearly the doom and gloom that's coming out of this election cycle. The reality is, I wouldn't trade our downtown for just about any other downtown in the country. We have tremendous assets, and the reality is we're 95% full. There's a 5% vacancy rate on State Street. It's too much. We're not used to it. There's 30 open vacancies, and we need to, the landlords primarily need to do a better job of marketing those properties and probably lowering the rents on those properties.
But we're losing anchor tenants, Macy's and the Saks store. I mean, it's just Amazon has destroyed retail, has it not? I mean, don't we have to look elsewhere for economic development?
Well, I think that's exactly the point, is when it's Amazon and it's the internet, it's not a local and economic phenomenon, it's a national phenomenon. And every city is ultimately going to be affected by that. But I think that our State Street is better positioned than a lot of other communities around the country because it is inherently very attractive. It's designed for pedestrians, it's designed for experiential shopping. It's not a destination location all by itself that's standalone in a suburban mall someplace that's likely to be closed. I think there is tremendous entrepreneurial vibrancy in this community if the price of rents were at the right place. And that's what when I talk to business owners who are interested in opening businesses on State Street, they are deterred by the high cost of the rent. So I think the market will find a different, lower price.
What can the city do about that?
Well, I think it's probably just the bully pulpit. We need to remind the downtown property owners that the city has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in the infrastructure downtown, that it is the core of the community, that it's a tremendous asset, and that we need to cooperate and collaborate to get those storefronts filled with young, vibrant, new entrepreneurs who want to do business in Santa Barbara. And I think that's what's going to happen.
All right. Well, Jack Gooseferry couldn't be here tonight, but so I'm going to ask some questions that he might have raised. Last time I checked, your campaign committee was sitting on about $100,000 plus, and I dare say you're probably not going to spend all of that in this campaign. Will you pledge here tonight that you'll serve a full 4-year term as the District 6 council person, or are you looking at that supervisor seat that Janet Wolf might vacate?
I'm running for council. I've served 12 years on the council, and every time I've run for election, folks have said, yeah, you're probably running for something else, aren't you? And I've demonstrated, I think, by the fact that I really care about this community and have served each one of those terms, that I'm committed to being on the Santa Barbara City Council. I enjoy the work. I really have great pride in this community, and I want to continue to serve to the best capacity that I have. And I am 100% focused on this race. My friend Janet Wolf is running for supervisor. We've had conversations about this in the past.
Oh yeah? She's running?
I was at her, in fact, I was the MC of her kickoff fundraising event earlier this year. And I fully expect her to run for re-election in the future, and I will be supporting her and knocking on doors for her. She's a tremendous representative for our community, and I'm a big fan.
So you will pledge to serve the whole 4-year term?
Well, I pledge to be fully committed to this election race and to serving the citizens of Santa Barbara on the council.
That's a big no, in case anybody's checking. All right, now, what is SBCAG? Tell us what SBCAG is. You're the Deputy Executive Director. What is that?
SBCAG is the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for Santa Barbara County. So we allocate state and federal dollars that come to the county for transportation projects. We're trying to fund the 101 freeway widening, have commuter rail connecting Ventura County and South Santa Barbara County, and interregional bus transit between the two counties. Trying to work on transportation issues countywide.
And I think probably most voters are familiar with SBCAG because of the 101 widening project and the great controversy over that. And you, as a council member, cannot vote on that issue when it comes before the council. Why?
Well, it's more limited than that. I can't vote on things where money is passing between SBCAG and the city of Santa Barbara and where there's financial implications of that because I'm an employee of the agency. So if there's a contractual relationship between the two entities, then I'm conflicted out. But if there are larger questions about transportation policy, I'm able to participate. And I have a great deal of experience and knowledge about that and bring that to my work on the council. And I've been an outspoken advocate for widening the freeway. I think that's the right thing for the community. There's a lot of connections between jobs and housing and transportation. The obvious one is as our community has become more expensive from a housing side, more folks have had to commute to Ventura County. They are a vital part of the workforce here in South Santa Barbara County. If you go to work, probably 2 or 3 out of 10 people that you work with are long distance commuters. And that's a very difficult toll on their lives to have to commute through that extra traffic on the 101 freeway. As time goes on and that traffic increases, there's a real risk that people down in Ventura County decide it's not worth it anymore to make that commute. And they'll take a job in Ventura County as opposed to making that commute to Santa Barbara. And if that's the case, we could potentially lose 30% of our workforce, making everybody else's job in jeopardy. So we're all in this together to solve the transportation problem connecting the two counties and widening the freeway with a carpool lane during the peak traffic hour and having this other alternative transportation with it is critical to that.
But there's a lot of people, starting with our mayor, Helene Schneider, who feel like SBCAG has really ridden roughshod over the city and on this project, and it's been extremely controversial. But why wouldn't voters look at your position and say, that's not just right. I want somebody who's looking at this purely from the perspective of a Santa Barbara council person rather than somebody who's got this other interest, be it employment, financial, planning, policy, whatever it is.
Well, I think it's quite the opposite, that having the regional perspective, understanding how the city's economy fits into the economy of the South Coast, understanding the relationship of jobs and housing and transportation is extremely valuable to the work I do. All of these things are interconnected. They all require experience and knowledge about how to incentivize the right kind of economic strategies for the city, and I think that's a real asset that I bring to the job.
We voted a few years ago as a Measure B, for a lane and a train. We were going to get the 101 widening, and we were going to get a commuter to. Where's my train?
The train has been difficult, but there is good news on the horizon.
That would be an understatement.
Union Pacific Railroad owns the tracks, so negotiating with them to come to an agreement to use those tracks has been difficult. But there is good news. The agency that operates the passenger trains between San Diego and San Luis Obispo is moving toward a retiming of the existing train schedule so that one of the trains that comes into town about 10 o'clock in the morning would get here during the peak traffic hour to serve the commute market, and then similarly leave Goleta and Santa Barbara in the afternoon for work time. So that can be a huge addition to the carpool lane that we're constructing on the freeway to provide a different alternative for folks commuting from Ventura County.
How much of the commute would that alleviate?
Well, the nice thing about it is the predictability of the time. It's not subject to the vagaries of congestion on the freeway. So the certainty of knowing when you're going to get to work and when you're going to get home, as opposed to the uncertainty of driving through that congestion on a daily basis. And that's only going to get worse over time as more people commute from Ventura because of the housing price. So it's a time savings, and I think that, and the stability of that is going to be very attractive.
But as a practical matter, how many people are we talking about that could use the train with only, 2 trains a day, one in, one out?
It's not really
Is it really going to make a dent in it?
The critical thing is that it arrives during the peak traffic hour, and that's the problem with the freeway, is that everybody's trying to come in at the same period of time. So if you can take 200 to 500 people out of what would otherwise be traffic on the 101 at the peak hour, at the critical time, that's a really valuable addition.
2 to 500, is that
Yeah.
what you're 2 to 500. And when's that going to happen?
Well, hopefully it's going to be happening spring of next year, but we've had a couple of false starts, so I don't really want to peg the time to that. But at this point, Senator Jackson has been very intimately involved in this work. She's been pressing very hard at the state level. She's gotten commitments from, the governor's office on down that this is a really high priority for the state, and that's new and that's different, and that's, I think, going to make a difference this time around.
What's the problem with Union Pacific? What's the big hang up?
Well, essentially, they're in the business of moving freight, not passengers. And so they're concerned, there's only one track, so only one train can be on the same track at the same time. So they're concerned about competition for that space. And they're worried that over time, this is going to be extremely successful and there's going to be more trains during the peak time. And that potentially is a threat to their business model. So they've been very, that's a consistent policy that they have across the country. And it's something we just have to work through to find a way to be successful with them.
So do you think it was false advertising to sell the voters on the idea that this was going to happen?
No, I think it's still going to happen. It just hasn't happened yet, and it's an aspirational goal that makes a ton of sense and ultimately is going to work, and we're just going to be persistent and be successful ultimately.
Do you think the city should allow for adult use cannabis retail spaces on State Street in District 6?
I think that I'm open to that. I don't know that there's anything inherently wrong with having retail cannabis operations. I think it's a legal product now as a result of what the voters have decided. And I think that, like everything in Santa Barbara, it's up to the design and the proper siting of those locations. But as a principle, I think that's appropriate.
So you would think it would be okay to have, say, 3 dispensaries in District 6?
I haven't thought specifically about numbers, but I don't think there's going to be objections to siting locations in the right places.
You don't?
No.
Now, Lompoc has decided that they're going to go ahead and just, open the floodgates for people to even use them on site. Do you think that's a good thing that we should do in Santa Barbara?
I don't know about on-site use. On the other hand, we have lots of bars and lots of restaurants that serve alcohol, and ultimately I think it's a product that's going to be eventually considered in the same way. So I don't know how fast, how quick we need to do these things, but I'm open to cannabis having a role in the city of Santa Barbara on a retail basis.
How big you're the finance committee chair, how much of a revenue stream is it realistically that we're talking about?
I don't think it's going to be significant, to be honest with you. The voters approved a very high tax rate of 20%. I think it's the highest tax rate that was approved by voters in the state of California. That's not likely to be the ultimate tax rate that we impose, because I don't think it's going to be realistic in the marketplace. We're going to have to figure out something that's more appropriate. There are many communities around the state that are competing for this business because they see it as a big economic benefit. I don't know that it's truly going to be that either. I think it's just another part of the economy, and I think Santa Barbara has a very diverse, very well-rounded economy, and this is just one little piece of it. I don't think it's going to solve our problems fiscally or cause real big impacts either. I mean, I travel around. I've been to Portland. I've been to other cities in the country that have legal cannabis now, and you don't even know the business is any different than any other business as you walk by the storefront, really.
So why is there so much concern about it from the neighborhoods?
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, and I think there's a lot of fear, and I think that as time goes on, that will dissipate.
So ballpark, more than $10 million, less than $10 million?
I'd be surprised if it was $1 million.
Really?
Yes.
Less than $1 million?
Yes.
Wow. And that's with the tax rate of 20%?
I don't think we'll impose a
Oh, I
20%
see.
tax rate. I think it'll be much less
So
than
the
that.
local tax can be as much as 20%,
Yes.
is that correct?
What we did is the voters approved a cap of up to 20%. And the council, as we go through the process of figuring out the local regulations about siting and all those other things, I think we'll revisit that tax rate.
And where does that stand now? What's the status
The
of that?
goal is to have that completed before the end of the year. That's the date that the state is looking toward for local governments to create their own local ordinances in preparation for the legalization in 2018.
Okay. All right, this question is Jack. I told Jack he could send in a question and I would ask you. He says, is Cox Cable's monopoly on high-speed internet an issue that voters care about? If so, what should the city do about it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. There is no monopoly. Cox Cable is a provider of internet services and cable television services, but they have a franchise agreement with the city to rent our public infrastructure. They rent from us the streets and they rent from us the poles and they pay a fee for that service. Any company can come in tomorrow and operate in a similar way and pay us a franchise fee. In fact, Cox has, I think, only about 50% of the cable television business. There's Dish and DirecTV that take up a huge percentage of the Santa Barbara marketplace, and even internet service competition. Frontier provides internet cable competition. So there's no monopoly. There's a big misunderstanding about that. The state of California regulates internet service providers, not the city of Santa Barbara. So the idea that there's a monopoly is just factually wrong.
How much do we get from the franchise fee?
I don't know off the top of my head how much it is, but it's fairly significant.
Is it more than marijuana or less than marijuana?
I think it's a lot more than marijuana.
Yeah. And Jack's idea, of course, is municipally owned fiber optic internet as an alternative to Cox Cable. Do you think that's a good idea, something that's worth looking into?
Well, there are local governments around the country that are doing that. There have been very mixed results from that effort. The difficulty from a government standpoint is to provide effective high-speed internet. You have to be on the cutting edge technologically. You have to be constantly upgrading the equipment to make sure it's state-of-the-art so that you have a good product. That's difficult to do without a dedicated revenue stream coming from customers. So that's where the private sector, I think, is able to do that better than a city government would do. I think there is an interesting niche where low-income people who need access to the internet don't fit into the economic model of a private business as well. And some cities have done that to try and provide an alternative access to internet at a more affordable price or no cost. But that does take a direct subsidy from the city's general fund to provide that. And I don't know that that's the highest priority for city taxpayer dollars.
Yeah. So you're not going to pursue that?
No.
Okay. Measure C, you're for Measure C, which
Yes.
is the 1 cent sales tax increase, allegedly for infrastructure. However, the council decided to make it a general tax rather than a specific targeted tax, because then you'd only need 50% plus one instead of a 2/3 vote. What guarantee is there that if people vote for it, it's going to go for roads and a police station and all the other things? Because if you read the ballot measure, it says services for homelessness, a lot of other things, and other general services. Why won't it? It does just go in the general fund, does it not?
It does, and that is going to be tempered by the reality of the need. You know, we have a very well-managed city that has been responsible, I think, with taxpayer dollars. We're very careful and cautious about that. We have fully funded reserves, so I think we're in good shape on the operating side, but we haven't been able to keep up with the infrastructure deficit, and it's become a significant problem. The roads aren't being maintained properly, sidewalks, the police station, we don't have the money to rebuild that building. So, and when you think about the cost of those things, there's about $12 to $15 million a year that we need to properly maintain the streets. And we're only able to spend about $2 million a year with the way the budget is structured today. Measure C would provide $22 million. So we'd be able to have the money to repair the roads, bring them up to the level necessary to continue that level of service into the future. And then the police station by itself is probably about a $5 to $8 million bond measure, where we would go out and we'd borrow the money so that we could build a police station soon and then pay that off over a 20-year period. So the two two,
using the sales tax as
yes,
the revenue
as the revenue
stream, to pay
stream, which
the bonds.
we don't have the capability, we don't have the financing to do that today because we don't have that revenue stream. But with Measure C, we would. And you put that 12 to 15 for roads and the 7 to 8 for the police station, and it takes up about 90% of the $22 million that's going to come from Measure C with those two projects alone. So it's the right proposal at a full cent. And it's necessary in order to provide the infrastructure people expect in the city.
But as a policy process matter, what would it take? So say Measure C passes, and then the next council meeting, what would it take for the council to pass in terms of legislation to make sure that those are the two needs that the money, the $22 million a year is directed towards? And is that likely to happen?
Well, you can't tie it up, because if you were tying it up, then you'd be having a specific tax that would require the 2/3
Well, once
vote.
you got the money, you could tie it up.
Well,
can't you?
I think that's playing a little fast and loose with the rules. So what we're going to have to do is put it in the general fund and then provide transparency in the accounting and the expenditures. So we're going to have a citizens oversight committee that's going to look at that on an annual basis. We're going to audit the money. We're going to show the taxpayers exactly how that money is spent. And I firmly believe and am committed to making sure that those projects that we talked about, the police station and road and sidewalk investment, have the first priority on those dollars.
But the last words in what the voter sees on Measure C is "and other general services." So what percentage of the 22 million do you think is going to go for other general services?
Well, I think that it's going to be determined by the council, and this is an important consideration for people to take when they're voting this November. But there is a critical need that we have to fill. I think that's widely recognized. There's a diverse array of stakeholders that are supporting Measure C, and the council is committed to making sure that we spend this money on infrastructure and make sure that we're doing what we're promising the voters to do. But the technical reality of it is, if you have a 2/3 vote requirement, that's how you can specify it and lock it down. I don't know that we would get 2/3. The polling showed us at about 64%. But if we come up just short, then we're not able to address this problem. We're not able to meet this need. And I think the community is ready to provide that revenue to solve this problem. But this is the best method we have to make that happen.
So this is going to be our first fully district elected council. The mayor will be the only citywide official elected citywide. Everybody used to be elected citywide. What difference is that going to make, do you think? And you'll be like the senior statesman there. So what do you see your particular role as being?
Well, I think I bring a style of leadership that is collaborative, that is respectful, and is really based on facts and evidence. That's how I try to operate, is by understanding these issues at a really deep level. And I think I communicate that well. I think I'm able to make the points that I'm trying to get across. And I think that I have good relationships with my colleagues now. And I look forward to the new people that are going to be elected. I know all of the folks who are running, and I think that there's some great candidates out there. I'm really thinking this is a great opportunity for city to really move forward in a positive way. And I'm excited about the prospects of working with these folks. Yes
or no? Are there any of the 5 candidates for mayor that you think would be unable to regularly round up 4 votes?
Yes.
All right. Gregg Hart will be back after the election to tell us which ones they were. Meanwhile, thank you very much to Councilmember
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate
Gregg Hart. And thank you all for watching. Please visit our website, newsmakerswithjr.com, where you can check out my regular blog posts on the campaign and politics in Santa Barbara, and find our entire series of interviews with the candidates for mayor and district council seats. Thanks to our director, Oscar Gutierrez, to our crew, Suzanne, Paloma, and Debbie, our marketing and branding consultant, Maggie Mabuchi, our law firm, Dewey, Cheatham & Howe, and as always, our top-ranking, high-powered, senior executive producer, Hap Freund. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.